And the question, have you asked yourself, what's my part? What part am I in this church? Have I committed? Am I really here? Or am I just here and there? What happens if suddenly one day you don't show up? What happens in this church? And then, generally, from the pastor's point of view, from the pastor, teacher, shepherd point of view, what we hear is, well, nobody noticed. But have you been the change that you want to happen in our church? If you weren't here, how would you notice if somebody else wasn't here and they needed help? If you weren't here, how would you know that the other person is hurting and that we should? We have to be here. We have to be available. So that leads me to the second part of this sermon, which is our church needs fat people. Now, I had a story about the bulldozer and all that. It actually happened to me exactly like that. That's why I had it there. You don't even have to go back to it, but one day I was in my backyard when our very first house we bought, and I got some free dirt. So I told this guy, bring dirt to my house. I need to fill up the backyard. And I had like about, there's 16 yards. I mean, this is mountains of dirt. So I had about 10 truckloads of 16 yards dumped in my front yard and all the side of my house. And I started, and I called my dad. My dad, when he was, this is a long time ago, he was strong and young, 70 years old, still stronger than me. And he came with his wheelbarrow and a shovel. I said, Dad, are you kidding me? He said, no, one shovel at a time. That was the thing you saw up there. I said, wow, that's a lot of faith. But I didn't call it faith back then. But I said, one shovel at a time. Dad, I've done it before. Don't worry about it. Shovel, shovel. So we're doing this for a couple of hours. And then it just happens. I saw a bulldozer, exactly like that cartoon that was up before. And I said, Dad, you have faith, I have faith. I talked to the bulldozer. He says, yeah, for $100, I'll push it back there. I said, Dad, move your shovel. I have a bigger shovel. Jesus is our bigger shovel. You're going to look at a mountain and you're going to think we can't move it. But God can move mountains. Don't look at what we see. Look at what we cannot see. All right? So we need faith. We need faithful people. Now I have a bunch of things here, and let me just go through them carefully, quickly. But so we need to be faithful, and what we mean by faithful, it's just in a lot of areas. If we're not faithful, that means that we're probably not available, because we have a lot of other things that are priority, right? So I'm not saying don't be faithful to your family or your wife or your job or all the things that have to be done. I'm not saying that, but we also need to be faithful to this huge calling and this mission and this vision that we have. So the first thing we need to consider is God can use us if we're faithful. Now, if we're not faithful, how's God going to use us? Because we have to respond to Him. In Matthew 25, I think it's verse 21, when Jesus returns, we want to hear this. Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over little things. I will set you over much, over bigger things. And He says, enter into the joy of your master. I want you to understand this has nothing to do with salvation issues, okay? But this is what Jesus wants. He wants you to be faithful in little things, little things. So He never said, well done, good and faithful servant. You showed up every Sunday and used up a chair in church. Or you heard 6,000 sermons. Or you did 5,000 Bible studies. Or you went to you taught Sunday school for years and years. Well done, good and faithful servant. No, He said, if you're faithful in little things, so you have to think carefully about these little things. Now, don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with little things, okay? These things are really good, okay? But we must be faithful in those little things, okay? Faithful in the sense that we are doing them unto the Lord. And you can do all those little things even on the rest of the time when you're not here. Because we're not just Christians on Sunday afternoon or morning. So what are those little things? So I was thinking about it last night. What are the little things? I was thinking, well, and I'm looking at it, I'm trying to picture from God's view, not from my view. And I'm thinking, well, anything on the physical realm is a little thing. It's things that you have control over. You cannot control everything, but there's certain little things that you can control. So in the physical realm, there is little things that you can control. In other words, in the natural realm, right, there's things we can do. And so everything we do, that we put our mind to it and we do it in our strength, so to speak, to God are little things. They're little things. So you give away $1 million. This guy did it one time. He gave, it was the Power to Change thing, and he gave $1 million. We had this whole campaign to change Surrey, or the world, I don't know what it was. But anyway, it was a lot of money. The guy gave it. And to God, that would be a little thing. $1 million to God is a little thing. It's a little thing because the guy could do it. He had his own strength to do it. There's nothing wrong with it. We should do it. We should be faithful in little things. The Bible says, faithful in little things. And then he will say, you were faithful in giving your time, perhaps. I mean, some people lots of time. Some people some time. It's kind of like the widow's offering. You know, people have different amounts of time. You were faithful in giving your time. So we always start with little things. We start by showing up regularly. That's a form of being faithful. We give in support financially our congregation, our church, the work. We say, yeah, this is a great mission. We should do it. The vision, yeah, sounds reasonable. We connect with people. So I want to give to that cause, and then we give our time, and that's precious to some even more than money. And so when we are faithful in those kinds of things, then God will use us in bigger things. In bigger things. So the question is, what are bigger things? Well, they kind of start to intermix, because there's us and there's what God does. And everything God does to us should be bigger things. So they're supernatural things. They're things that we can't even imagine. God says, you can't even ask or imagine what He's able to do. So He is able to do greater things. So there's supernatural things, kind of like prayer, kind of like leadership, where all of a sudden you think, wow, I feel rotten today, but I gotta go to church, because what if somebody needs prayer? And they were thinking, I'll go to church and get so-and-so to pray for me, and now you're not here. Now, the thing is, you don't overly burden yourself, but it's like you start to feel a burden to come and serve. Serve what? The gospel of Christ, so that we bring it out to the world. The salvation that God is offering to people, we want to present it. We have something, we have the solution for the world. This is a big thing. All the problems of the world will be resolved with the gospel. Such a simple thing, yet so powerful to transform everything. And that's spiritual transformation. Then there is discipleship. This is a big thing. You're willing to stick by a friend that nobody else sticks by, and just love that person into the kingdom, and then continue loving him into maturity. And that will create the sort of sanctifying the whole community, both ours and in our community around us. It will start to flow out there. Families, friends, neighbors. And eventually you'll see that the whole city of Surrey will truly be changed. So I know we're not doing, this is not a good comparison. I know we need to be more faithful, because it's not just us, it's all of Surrey. Because if you really look at it, is anything changing in the real Surrey? Or are we just moving people here and there and there, and they're moving around from church to church? But God wants faithful people. And so one way to be faithful is to intentionally do the little thing and be available. Now, if you're faithful, that means you're actually available, because faithful people make themselves available. So you show up, you say, I'm here, use me. Right? Use me. So when we're faithful to God's calling on our lives, it becomes a priority in our lives. Right? We schedule time around what we have purposed ourselves and been called to. To some of us, you know, we had a lot of things going, thank you very much. As you know. But somehow God impresses on your heart to do the greater thing. And so at some point, you have to make some choices. And so, you know, there's a lot of things that happen and decisions that have to be made. You want to examine your life and you think, well, am I putting too much into this thing and not enough into the greater thing? So is there something that needs to be dropped? Is there something in my life that I have to change? Is there something, maybe I need to reorganize how I do things and where I go every day? Maybe I need to change how much money I spend. Maybe I don't need to drive a new car. Maybe I can drive an old car and serve God. These are all different things that have happened in people's lives. And I had to make big, big decisions. And then not only that, God had to also change the heart of my wife to make those decisions together, because they affect the whole family. But we decided that, you know, this is the greater thing, to continue serving the gospel of Christ and to keep learning and to keep growing in humility. Because we don't know everything. I don't know how everything is going to turn out, but I know the one who knows. And I can tell you for sure that He wants to prosper us. So if you examine your life, is it possible that God wants you to reprioritize? Faithful people then, I want to continue fast here because we've got to get to the end. So listen to me. God is not looking, you know this, you've heard it all the time, but you need to hear it this morning. God is not looking for the greatest and the best people. He's not looking for that. You guys are the greatest and the best people to God. Everybody. When I started, I couldn't even speak. English is my second language. I'm not that smart. God is transforming our lives. I've seen people being transformed completely. God's not looking for the best people, but He uses regular people like us who are faithful and available and surrender to Him and say, God, do what you can, because do whatever you can with me, and surrender to Him and be ready to be faithful and available. And usually those faithful, available people, then they're teachable too. So you have to, you can't, because we have to admit that we need to learn something. God always wants to teach us. So in order to be a teachable person, then must have a measure of humility. You have to be able to say, I thought I had it all figured out, but now I don't have it all figured out. Or maybe you have to be able to say, well, I need some time out. I'm too worn out. I can't do this. And, maybe I need to go on a retreat and rest. Maybe I need to spend more time with my wife. Because we have to pray about this is important. Because the course of our life is important. But it's only important in light of this calling on your life for the gospel. Every Christian has that calling, right? So you have to think about it. Maybe we got to sell the big house. Maybe we got to sell the new car. Maybe we got to, get a different job. Whatever it is, because this has to be up there in priorities, right? I had a friend that I used to work with, this friend, and he, my job, the same job that Ashok does, and when I was working, and this guy, you know, I knew him, we went to school together, we came out of school, 10 years, 5 years, 3, 4 years later I saw him, 5 years later I saw him, 10 years later I saw him, and then we got a job together. And I noticed he didn't know anything. Like he just, all he did was trying to cover up his mistakes all the time. All the time. And he was trying to, he always had an excuse or a reason, and then after work he would come to me and he would sort of in a roundabout way ask me to show him, but he wasn't really asking, he just was sort of interested, you know, kind of finding some way, and I thought to myself, this poor guy is never going to learn a thing. Because he can't admit he needs to learn. He couldn't even believe it himself that he needed to know something. Because when he portrayed himself, and the way he dressed, and the way he acted, he knew everything. But then, when you worked with him, he knew very little. He knew about what we knew in school, and now I still know him, 30 years later. He knows a little more. He's been humbled along the way. So God is good. But he could have learned a lot more. So a disciple of Jesus must be teachable by the very definition, because a disciple is an apprentice, is a follower. There's a lot of things. I'm not preaching on that. But he's a learner. But he's a learner by observing and doing. See, that's how I learned how to do this. I observed and learned. I've seen some poor guys who go, I don't want to learn by apprenticeship. I want to learn by getting a big degree. Now, I could do that, and I did do those studies. But yeah, and then they come out, and they're just kids out in the field of ministry, and they didn't do the apprenticeship. But now they're professionals. And in less than 18 months, they go, wow, this is like really not good. Because it's really hard, because you need to learn, you need to grow, you need to build the calluses. You need you have to be able to take criticism and good and bad and godly and not godly. And this is a hard, but God grows you into it. And when God grows you into it, you wouldn't want to do anything else but. It's not that hard, right? And but here's the thing about discipleship. Every one of you is a disciple. That means you are following an example, somebody who's working with you, perhaps a little more mature, maybe an older person, doesn't matter age, but could be even a younger person, but somebody that you look up to and you're accountable to. And at the same time, you are discipling someone. This is the natural thing. I've beautifully seen it in Safari's life. He has a group, and he's mentoring, and he's being mentored, and I think it's working. I think it's working. I see it in your heart changing. And so, in Luke 9, though, Jesus said a very sobering thing in Luke 9, 23 and 24. Then he said to them all, whoever wants to follow, he'd asked them to follow. Whoever wants to follow, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross daily, and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will save it. What he's really saying in a nutshell is you have to be sold out. Jesus says, I don't want people that follow and then, no, this is serious. Right? It's the most joyful thing you could do. But you have to follow, and every morning you have to remind yourself. Because we have very short memory, and shorter as we get older. But you have to say, no, it's not about me today. Some of us have a big ego. We go, oh, it's not about, no, it's not about me. Jesus said, surrender. Die to my own agenda and follow him. And somebody says, well, every time you get a phone call, you jump. Every time. Well, it's because I'm consciously, right away, the makeup in my brain, I know the priorities. Somebody says, I'm in distress, and somebody else says, I've got a business deal, I'm going to go to the distress. Because God can take care of my business deal. And he has. He has. All the people that work, this is the greatest testimony at ProDraft. Everybody should be a Christian by now at ProDraft. Because they know my God. They know Ashok's God. And they follow. And they even give credit to God when we get our work and when we're successful in jobs and produce things. They give credit to God, but they don't follow Him. So we just leave that up to God, right? God is going to do some work there one day.